I mean, in the early days, it was easy because, we didn't, we weren't close to hitting our minimum. So in the early days, the more volume, the better. There were times in the business when, certainly not now. Now we can keep us up with as much demand as there is. But there was a time in the business when I had, request for orders from Walmart and request for orders from Costco, and I couldn't do both. I just couldn't do both. And so I remember I had to turn Costco down, and that was really hard. But sometimes as an entrepreneur, our by our very nature, we're yes people. Yes, I can do it. Yes, I can get it there. Yes, it can be done. So no is not a popular word in our vocabulary. It certainly wasn't in mine, but I had a reputation to think about, and the worst thing you can do for your customers is make a promise you can't keep.
Hello, I'm your host, Mike Gelb, and this is the Consumer VC podcast, where we discuss the intersection of venture capital and consumer innovation. If you're enjoying the show, also subscribe to our newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive new episodes straight to your inbox and a weekly recap of all the consumer deals that are happening. All content and episodes are for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not investment advice. Our guest today is Gail Becker, the founder of Caulipower, the most disruptive company in the better-for-you frozen food space, and named as one of the top 10 world's most innovative food companies in 2022 by Fast Company. Hypergrowth company reached more than $100 million in revenue in 5 years under her leadership as CEO. We discuss how and why she left corporate America to start Caulipower, her approach to growth through retail, how she thought about fundraising and managing her cap table, and what capital efficiency means to her and product expansion. Without further ado, here's Gail. Gail, thank you so much for joining me here today. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I like fun.
I wanted to start from the very beginning. So you were this PR executive.
Okay.
You were working in corporate America. I know that you were inspired by your kids.
I was.
They have celiac disease, and you were looking at different food options for them. But taking the leap and founding a company, that's quite the leap. So what kind of went into actually going you to actually make that decision, and as well as experimenting as well with cauliflower?
Yeah. So to be perfectly honest, it's such an interesting phrase that you use. I don't know that I was inspired by my kids. I certainly got the idea from my kids, but I suppose in many ways I was inspired by helping other people like me. And I think that that really is such a calling for so many entrepreneurs. As you say, I was, in corporate America, relatively happy, climb the top of the corporate ladder, all that good stuff. But I felt unfulfilled. And when my father passed away, I also felt like I needed something more meaningful. I really needed to help people. I needed to do something that was, going to impact people's lives in some tiny but positive way. And but I didn't know how. I didn't know what that third missing piece would be. And as the mom of two boys with celiac disease, I grew very frustrated by what I saw the industry was putting in gluten-free food: more fat, sugar, salt, and calories, and less nutrients. And I guess, like probably many people you have on the show, I sort of thought, well, someone's going to do something about this, but no one ever did. And so I stumbled across cauliflower crust pizza one day on the internet. There were lots of recipes on how to make it online, and I made one and it was okay, but it took a ridiculous amount of time, 90 minutes after a full day of work to be precise. And so I put all of those things together, right? My frustration with corporate life, the passing of my father, and the realization that I wanted to honor him in some way because he was an entrepreneur. And this realization that I can't be the only one that thinks 90 minutes is a ridiculous amount of time to make a pizza crust. So I put all of those things together, And what I came out with was, I know I'm going to leave my job and start a company called Caulipower. And that's what I did in May of 2016.
That's unbelievable. At what point I know you were kind of sick and tired, it seems, of your job, corporate America, wanted to solve this problem that you felt other people were experiencing, taking 90 minutes to actually create a cauliflower pizza. But at what point did you start from scratch and just say, I'm going all in from the very beginning? Or did you already have like a product in market that you were kind of working on the side? What was that like?
Well, I'm embarrassed to answer the question because just by the way that you asked it made it feel like maybe I should have had done a little bit more prior. No, I didn't have any food experience, so I didn't. Other than I cooked it, bought it, and ate it. So certainly had nothing else in market. I just made dinner and lunches like everybody else. Um, I think the decision to sort of go big or go home, honestly, had a little bit to do with my age. That I was a little bit of an older entrepreneur. And, I realized, boy, I should have done something like this probably several times over my life, but I didn't. So if I waited this long, I better go all in. And that's ostensibly what I did. I didn't. There are lots of companies, particularly lots of food companies that sort of start small, create a product, sell it in the farmer's market, sell it to their friends, go online, blah blah. That's a great way to start a business in the food space. Wasn't my way. I just decided, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to go big. Yeah, so I just went right to manufacturing.
So once you took the first leap, I mean that first step, manufacturing. Talk to me a little bit about, since you didn't have any experience in the food business. What was that like, finding the right partner and also building the brand from scratch?
It was horrible. I had to kiss a lot of frogs and princes and however that goes. Because most people, honestly, and this is sort of that catch 22 with a lot of, newly minted entrepreneurs is that, no one wanted to take me on. They either thought, well, this woman doesn't know anything about the food industry, or you can't make a crust out of cauliflower, or your volume's not big enough for us and we just don't have the room. And so basically, I met a lot of potential manufacturers who gave me all, sometimes one, sometimes two, sometimes all three of those answers. And, there wasn't a lot to choose from because gluten free pizza manufacturing, frozen pizza manufacturing, then and even still now is relatively limited, particularly when you're talking about that small of a run. So it was really hard to find someone who would take a bet on me. And I did hire a consultant to help me find these manufacturers because clearly I didn't know how. And that was really, and I was a sponge, and I still am a sponge, and I just listened and learned and asked a lot of questions, and finally got to a point where we could make it.
Also, how much money did you, since you kind of went all in from the beginning, how much money did you kind of set aside in order for Power, and what did you feel like maybe your first benchmark was, or was going to be?
Well, certainly not enough. How much money? Not enough. Ask any founder that, and he or she will answer the same. Um, I will say that I did self fund for the first year. Just like everything you hear and read, I took my own savings, a lot of my own savings, some money that I had, received from my father, who only had a small business. He didn't have a large business, but he certainly was an entrepreneur and came here with nothing. Maxed out my credit cards, really like gave my life an overhaul, and really struggled in the beginning. But in some ways, those were really great times too, because boy, to go all in on something, mind, body, spirit, bank account, that's quite a feeling. And I love those times, ironically. I really did. And obviously it's different now, but I guess, I started the company in May of 2016, and the money lasted me until August, September of 2017. So I just made it last as long as I could. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine what that feels like going all in from the get go. I mean, kudos to you, and obviously it's worked out.
Well, it all sounds very smart now, but at the time it was pretty stupid. Let's be honest. I, I don't think anyone thought it was a good idea back then. But probably like a lot of people that you interview, it's almost like a calling. It's just something I knew I had to do. I can't explain it. But it was just this, something was pushing me, something was pulling me, something was telling me, and really for the first time in my life, I decided to listen.
How did you approach from the beginning? Obviously you find the right manufacturer through your consultant. How did you also approach sales channels from the beginning? Was it first D2C, or were you able to go to farmers markets, or what was kind of that in terms of the actual sales side?
Yeah, well, so farmers market is just not scalable. I mean, that's like great for some people, but I was going straight to manufacturing. I was definitely going all in for retail. Um, D2C is also very hard when you're talking about frozen. It's not really an option. I was in Amazon in the early days, and certainly you could still get us there today, but the cost of frozen shipping is so high that it's much easier and cheaper to buy it in stores. And so my goal was to achieve distribution and mass distribution as quickly as I could, and really take advantage of my first to market position. And I think that when you start a company, when you have a mission, when you really do want to help people, which was the reason I started Caulipower. My goal, my mission was to make, better, more nutritious food accessible to all. And in order for me to do that, that meant I had to be available really in every category of retail, whether it was natural or specialty or mass or grocery. And so that's what I did, and I did that as quickly as I could.
What was the first channel or the first kind of win? Was it targeting first, the natural channel, and whichever channel it was, how were you able to actually get into?
The first retailer I was in was 30 Whole Food stores. So Whole Foods has this program where you can pitch the region that you live in. So I lived in the SoPac region, which was Los Angeles and a few other uh, regional cities. And so I just submitted I took my very very expensive 4 samples of pizza, and brought them in a styrofoam crate to the regional office of Whole Foods. They didn't even let me meet anybody. And about a week later, I got a note from the buyer that they really liked it and they're going to bring them in to those 30 stores. And that was like, that was a moment. That was a like, because up until that point, it's just a bet. I spent all of that time, all of that money. You don't know. So I could have made this, fantastic product, or maybe, I could have made a not so fantastic product, and no one might have brought it in. But so when the first buyer, brought them in, it was really just, definitely a moment in the trajectory of the business, and a day I'll never forget, really.
Clearly, during those first the kind of trial period of the 30 stores, it must have gone pretty well, I'd imagine.
It went pretty well.
So what was then, did Whole Foods come back to you and say, we want to put this in X amount of stores? Like, what was that kind of retail expansion from there?
Well, it was, it's funny. It took a it does take a while to expand regions in Whole Foods, but obviously eventually we got there. But initially, like, they don't know how these products are going to do, right? So they order fairly small. Oh, it's a new brand, no one's heard of it. Let's just bring in, not a lot. And they sold out in 2 days, and the distributor sold out in 2 days. And so I just remember just getting frantic calls and frantic orders, like wanting more, more, more. And we were like last priority at the co-manufacturer. So it's this dance, this really delicate dance. Make more, more, please. And they're ordering, and you're trying to deliver them, and oh my gosh, just crazy. It was crazy. And your team is small, really small. There were like three of us, four of us at the time. And just trying to keep up with those orders was, really significant. We needed to prove that we could continuously deliver. And we did. And we obviously grew from there.
Yeah, because I'd imagine it also takes like a heavy toll. It's a good problem to have, but still a problem to have, right? That there's so much demand for your products on the operations. Talk me through a little bit about how you also thought about like the operations, and actually scaling like that side too when it came to Caulipower.
Well, I mean, in the early days, it was easy because, we didn't we weren't close to hitting our minimum. So in the early days, the more volume, the better. There were times in the business when, certainly not now. Now we can keep us up with as much demand as there is. But there was a time in the business when I had, request for orders from Walmart and request for orders from Costco, and I couldn't do both. I just couldn't do both. And so I remember I had to turn Costco down, and that was really hard. But sometimes as an entrepreneur, our by our very nature, we're yes people. Yes, I can do it. Yes, I can get it there. Yes, it can be done. So no is not a popular word in our vocabulary. It certainly wasn't in mine. But I had a reputation to think about. And the worst thing you can do for your customers is make a promise you can't keep. And so I did tell them no, and it was really a good decision. And I was able, as a result, I was able to service everyone else.
Yeah, I feel like you say yes, and then behind the scenes you're like, okay, now we got to figure it out since that's a yes.
Oh,
Um,
I still do that.
what was that decision, partly? Why? Because obviously you couldn't be, as you were kind of scaling up. I know it's obviously different now when it comes to the business, but back then, as you were scaling, you had to pick maybe which retailer to enter and kind of focus on one retailer. Why did you, in that example, take, for example, Walmart over Costco?
Well, a couple reasons, and that was really the only time, and just a really good example of, a finite, a binary decision. There was really none other, given that they're both so large. So Costco was one region. You just started in one region. It wasn't it wasn't national. And Walmart was national, even though at the time it was only 900 stores. Today, that our relationship with them is much bigger. But you know, look, my goal, if you go back to my mission, which I always try and do, and really every founder and every company should do, I wanted to make, you know, more nutritious food accessible to all. Well, Walmart was a pretty damn good way to do that. And they've been a great partner for us, and continue to be. And I think it was the right decision. Costco, sometimes they bring you in, sometimes not. And to be honest with you, I've really struggled getting back in Costco since then. But I'm hoping now that the stars have aligned. But yeah, that's just you always have to put your customers first, and sometimes putting your customer first is making sure that you can keep all the promises that you make.
At what point did it make sense for you to raise a round of venture capital? How roughly, what was roughly like the size of the company, and how many stores were you in when you decided to raise a round from BFG?
Well, it was, it wasn't that. It's easy. How do you know when? When you run out of money. Or I mean, I didn't have to hear like fairy bells ring or anything. Um, and it was, technically you should raise it before you run out of money. I probably did it a little bit late, to be honest with you. I self-funded from March 2016 through October 2017. That's when we were going into Walmart, and I didn't have enough money to make the product to go into to sell to Walmart. So I needed money so that I could fulfill those orders.
I'd imagine that you probably, due to the demand, had like a suite of investors. Why did you land with BFG?
I didn't have a suite of investors. Most people turned me down. No, most people turned me down, to be honest with you. Um, I think, look, you know, women get 2% of VC dollars. I saw it happen 100 times to me, to other people. So I'm sure that played into it a little bit. I'd like to say we were a new, untested product, but we weren't. We were already in market, at least in Whole Foods and some other retailers. We were killing it. We were already going into Walmart. So, it's not like that was a hope and a dream. That was a reality. And, I think a lot of people thought, oh, cauliflower crust pizza, that's not really a thing. Most people said, most potential investors said, we want to see how you do in Walmart, which was really interesting to me because I don't, you know, I thought it was supposed to be called venture capital, like, or risk capital, but so a lot of people turned me down. Now, a lot of people that turned me down came back the following year and were basically throwing money at me. But in early on, it was very hard to raise money.
When I was reading about your story and everything with Caulipower, that's to me what was really impressive because you were one of the fastest growing brands to 100 million in sales. And yet you didn't raise that much VC funding considering about how much you accomplished on the sales side, which and again there's no, one way to skin a cat. There's no like right kind of answer here, but it seems like from like kind of like a capital efficiency standpoint, you were doing really well with Caulipower.
We were really capital efficient. We've always been capital efficient. I love that word. I think that's just a great phrase, and I'm very proud of that. You know, and I think, a lot of it stems, quite frankly, from very early on. I said, my dad left me a little bit of money in the form of his house, the small house that he lived in for many years, the only house he'd ever owned. And he, I know, I lived how hard he worked for that money. Like I saw it, and I just thought, I better be careful with it. That's like blessed money. That is like money dripped in sweat and tears, and I needed to protect it, and I needed to make it last as long as I possibly could. And that has probably, you know, been a continuous theme throughout the, building and trajectory of Cauliflower. And it all started because I thought so highly, and I knew how hard my dad had worked for that money.
During that growth phase, and obviously Caulipower is still growing, but during that kind of really fast growth stage, for going to 0 to 100 million, are there some maybe examples that you can pull from when you thought about how you were being capital efficient, and whether that's balancing like the profitability and the growth side of the business, to how you think about maybe like margins or just whatever kind of comes to mind?
You know what? It's hard because at the time we just needed to grow, right? So certainly, obviously, our goal was always to be profitable, but as you know, that does take a little bit of time. And a lot of competitors came into the market, and we had to, battle them, and we had to get another co-man. And there were all these things that we needed to spend that money on that was going to be a long-term investment for the future of the company. So I've always had sort of that long-term view. But, we were, very cautious about, there were some things, we weren't slap happy with the money. Sometimes I see these brands and they do these whole, these huge activations or whatever. And we certainly have done our fair of activations. But we tried to be really thoughtful and smart around it. We really, obviously we are a marketing driven company, which is, has always been, but we relied very heavily on earned media, which can be much cheaper. And so, that was one way that we were able to, make the dollars stretch a little bit further. Even our headquarters, I didn't put the headquarters of a company in a very sort of exciting or flashy, like, Venice kind of cool, showcase with ping pong tables in the middle. That would have been great, and I'm sure my team would have loved it, but I just couldn't see spending money on that. I wanted to spend money on the company, on the products, and on our people, and that's where I focus the efforts.
On the marketing and branding side to Caulipower, because I know that now you're the chief branding and innovation officer. How how did you think about because I know that you said there's a ton of competitors kind of entering the market. It became maybe a pretty exciting, attractive, hot space. How do you think about the overall positioning of Caulipower versus some of your competitors?
Well, look, I always say that, or people have told me, imitation is the biggest form of flattery, right?
Flattery.
And if that's true, I feel very flattered, because there's a lot of competitors that came into the space. I think, look, we just always played our own game. We always played our own game. I didn't look behind me. I just kept looking forward. And I think what happened is that a lot of the competitors were so quick to get in, were so wanted a piece of what Caulipower was building, that, and they made subpar products. And I think, consumers and retailers really spoke and said, no, we don't want that. We want Caulipower. And I think the retailers brought in a lot of those competitors because they thought, oh, great, these people are going to do for, the frozen aisle what Caulipower did, but they didn't. And so, there was a time when they all sort of came to market. There were 50 new SKUs from like 30 different brands. And then, the following year, a lot of them left. And so, one of the things that we've always done, we've always looked straight ahead. We don't look at the competition. We play our own game, and we make the best damn products that we can make. And I think that, a lot of times, you know, big food, as they call it, or some of our larger competitive set, they bet against they bet against the consumer, in the sense that they don't think that the consumer is going to know any better. At Cauliflower, we always bet on the consumer. We absolutely believe that the consumer is going to know better. In fact, we're betting on it. And I think that's what we proved out when all of those, in those couple of years when, the market was just flooded with competitors.
No, that's it's a bet on your quality and people and that the consumers will actually be able to tell a difference and maybe read the labels and really understand what type of ingredients are actually in and making sure it's not kind of fluff or filler ingredients.
Exactly, exactly.
That makes sense. At what point did you realize, hey, we have to expand and diversify and expand maybe our product assortment, and which product did you start off with?
Um, it's interesting, I didn't really expand the portfolio until I felt like we had permission to do that from our consumers. And I really felt like because our consumers are wonderful. They talk to us, they share information with us, they share ideas with us. They talk to us all the time in every form that you could possibly imagine. We listen, and I think that's really what sets Caulipower apart. So, we have, tried a number of different products over the years. Some were hits, some were less so. Our number two product is our chicken, which is real chicken coated in cauliflower and then baked and not fried. And that was just a huge hit, and continues to be for us, and is very popular, and grows in popularity every day. It's a strong, strong product line, and we've certainly innovated from that. So we started out with two tenders, original and spicy. Then we have nuggets, and then we're introducing a new chicken product at the end of in fourth quarter of this year, or third quarter. And we also recently launched frozen meals, pasta meals directly from Italy, which are amazing. So I think you could say the house of Caulipower is primarily built on pizza. Obviously, pizza. That's what made us famous. Chicken and meals, and that's where you'll see our growth continue to expand.
What was the decision making when you were expanding new SKUs in terms of which SKU you actually wanted to land on? Was there also customer research, since you obviously built your brand up through pizza? And if so, what were kind of maybe like tests that you ran before you actually invested into a new SKU?
Yeah, so I mean, look, in the beginning, we didn't have much research. We couldn't afford much research. Now we do. Now we are swimming in research, lots and lots and lots of research. So that's super helpful and wonderful. And we have all kinds of great people on the team who help us digest that research and tell us what it means and tell us what our consumers are looking for. And that's all great. We tend to go to meaty categories that are like, sizable. We also look at categories that are ripe for disruption, right? Categories that maybe haven't been touched in so long. And I think our chicken is a wonderful example of that. That tends to be where we gravitate. Look, I think we've also had a lot of products end up on the cutting room floor, because all of our products have to sort of meet the trifecta of tasting great, having some nutritional advantage, and being convenient. And it's, as I always say, really easy to make something taste great, really easy to make something healthy, really easy to make something quick, really, really hard to do all three. And so there's a lot that we've left on the cutting room floor that may have hit one or two of those marks, but not the third. So really now the portfolio is really where we want it to be. And we've been concentrating on that for the last couple of years now.
Yeah, that's a great that is true. Having a great tasting product that actually, provides some nutritional value. And as well also that, is not too costly too, right? To actually purchase. To make sure your pricing is right, that it's affordable. Like that is a really kind of hard triangle to balance. And so also to think about it from that sphere, of course it has to taste great. That's, the number one priority. But balancing those three things, I think that is, you know, where the opportunity is in various categories in CPG, but also at the same time, also what makes it really challenging in terms of true innovation.
Yeah. No, well said on all fronts. Agreed.
What's kind of the next, do you think? Is it expanding into more SKUs and build and making more different types? Is it potentially like an M&A, or like M&A opportunities? Is there potentially like an IPO opportunity? Like what do you kind of see in terms of like the future of Power in your mind?
Well, look, I always say I never say never to anything. There are certainly things that I gravitate more toward than others, but certainly never say no to anything. Look, I think that really we're just getting started, and we want to be the number one better for you frozen food company. Full stop. That's what we want to be. I think we are well on our way. And, and there's all kinds of things that are represented from that. There's day parts, there's other parts of the grocery store, there's, you know, uh, geographies, there's all kinds of ways to achieve that. I will say that we're also, you mentioned our retail stores, which is about 30,000 now, but also we're in 5,000 restaurants. Our food service business is going quite well, and I think there's also opportunity there. So there's a number of different growth paths for us to get there, which is great. But we're just going to keep focused on making great products for our consumers, and really introduce the products to new consumers, which I personally am very excited about.
I think what's also um, really kind of interesting because, as you say, like there's so many brands coming up, but what is really hard about what you do is the fact. I mean, obviously, there's many hard parts when it comes to your product, but also the fact that it's frozen, and the fact that you actually have like a frozen supply chain, and that is such a I would think deterrent for entrepreneurs, and also a competitive advantage for you all that you've had that figured out at scale on the demand side. And I know that there's a lot of kind of competitors now in the category, but I would imagine someone is less likely to start a frozen food company rather than like a shelf stable company, for example.
Well, if they were smart, sure, they absolutely would avoid frozen at all costs. I unfortunately was not that smart. I like to say ignorance is bliss. To me, it was just like I wanted to do frozen pizza, so let's do frozen pizza. But and again, I had no money, no real research early on. But I didn't know that frozen was the most competitive space in the grocery store. How would I know that? Of course, it's the most competitive because it's the least amount of space. Um, yeah, and I always say I have bar envy because I always see people either at shows or on the street. Oh, have a bar, have a bag of chips. I can't do that. I can't give away product like that. Or people say, oh, could you serve Caulipower at this event? Sure. Do you have freezers? Do you have an oven? No. Well, then we can't. And so it's like I absolutely have that envy. It is hard. It is hard. But, everything's hard.
That's great insight. Great insight. What's one book that's inspired you personally and one book that's inspired you professionally?
The one that has inspired me professionally, actually is not too far from here. It's like I almost want to grab it and read from it. It's called Grocery, which I know sounds riveting, but it actually is because I didn't know anything about, but it was like a New York Times bestseller. It's not like, oh, grocery, but it was written by this guy. Oh, I'm so upset. I can't recall his name, but he worked in a grocery store growing up, and he writes about the industry, and he has this line in there early on in the book where he basically talks about how important food is, and it really is like, you know it is the great equalizer because it's the one thing like air and water we all need. No matter how much money you have or how little money you have, we all need to eat. And the process by how we get our food is pretty remarkable. And if you didn't know it before the pandemic, boy, did you know it after the pandemic, because all of a sudden, the intricacies and the faults that lie within our food system were on the front page of the news, right? The food supply chain, that was news. That was top of the news because nothing was more important. How were people going to eat? How were people going to be locked in their homes and eat? And so I really I appreciated that book because it made me realize, wow, if I can pull this off, if I can do this, this is going to be something important. This is going to be something meaningful. This is going to help people in some way. I really love that. And I'm so appreciative for that book. Again, I just feel like I want to run over and get it because it really just had this beautiful way of reminding me of something that was always so obvious.
I love that you brought up this book because no one else. We've done 300 episodes of this podcast, and I must say, Gail, you are so original. No one else has brought up this book, Grocery. So really, really excited
No, but
to.
it was on the New York Times bestseller. I'm
I
serious.
know,
It's
I
not like
know.
okay.
I believe you. I totally believe you. No, I love it. I love it when we actually get new book recommendations. So this is great. This is
But you
great.
don't have to be, let me just say this, you don't have to be in the industry to appreciate it. You just, and the thing is, we all buy food. We all have a relationship with food.
I know you talked a little bit about the pandemic, and of course, that made us all, realize how much we kind of love food and just love. I mean, I would say appreciate just things in general. During the pandemic, how did you think about Caulipower during, from a sales channels perspective? Since you're in, thousands of stores, how did the pandemic affect Caulipower? I'd imagine it would be quite drastic, but how did you think through it?
Drastic is being kind. It was just horrible. I mean, it was like just because it wasn't just like you were taking the company virtual overnight, which clearly we were, just like everybody else, but we were an essential business. Everything that we did just got 1,000 times more complicated. Not only could it was excruciatingly hard to get the food from point A to point B, but we couldn't even make the food because people weren't making the food standing more than 6 feet apart in some cases. So there were challenges everywhere, everywhere. And then there were not enough trucks and not enough drivers. And I mean, I could just, tell you stories. When I started, my hair was straight. Let's just say that. So I think, but what it did for me personally, and I hope for the company, and in many ways, I hope for the country, is that it it really underscored what a real problem food scarcity and hunger is in this country. So, my parents were children of the war, they were Holocaust survivors. My dad always said, the cold was horrible, the pain, the death, everything was horrible around him. But the worst thing was the hunger. The worst thing was the hunger. And it's funny, didn't know it at the time, didn't know that it would impact me, but there is very few things that I hate to see more than people who are hungry. And that is why from our very first sale of our very first pizza, we've given a percentage to help build teaching gardens in underserved schools across the country that really, teach kids how to grow vegetables, how to use vegetables, how to eat vegetables, how important healthier, nutritious food is for you so that you can go out and do what you need to do in the world. And there was so that had always been our program, except during the pandemic, kids weren't going to school. There were no teaching gardens. So we pivoted and we were able to give out and support, buy produce from farmers and from local farmers in 4 different cities. And together with the American Heart Association, give out boxes of food during the pandemic to over 100,000 families. And, one day for the one in LA, the whole team, practically the whole team came out, all in the height of the pandemic before any vaccines, all wearing the masks and everything. And we just spent, days putting boxes of food in people's trunks. And wow, talk about power. Talk about the power to help people and impact people. And, really how lucky so many of us are to not have to think about where we're going to get our next meal from. And if there was any silver lining to that time in our society and in our country, I hope it's that people realize, you know, the importance of and really it should be a right to food in this country. And, if Caulipower can help, with that in some tiny, tiny way, I'll consider that a job well done.
Yeah, I would 100% consider that a win. Gail, what is one piece of advice that you have for entrepreneurs that are starting or have and currently scaling a food business?
To the people out there who may be executing, or, maybe even more so, Mike, to all the people who just have an idea and are wondering, what do I do? I would say, and maybe the pandemic again taught us sort of the fragility of life, but good ideas are a dime a dozen. What you really need is execution. And I think, many of us, think that there's this magical time to start a business. Clearly I waited a long time. But maybe I was meant to wait a long time. But there's no right time. There's no wrong time. But there is just this time. And, I would ask all those people, like, what are you waiting for? Today's a great day. Today's a great day to start. So, you know, go for it. Bet on yourself, and, don't leave yourself wondering what might have been.
Gail, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Mike, thank you so much. I loved it. I think I have a free coupon for your guests. Is that okay?
Oh, you do? That is
I
that is
do.
great. That is
Okay.
great. Yeah.
So, if you direct message Caulipower on any of our social channels, and use the consumer VC, right? Then we'll give you a coupon good for one free product of your choice. So it's like nothing to lose.
There we go. There we go. We love free. We
I love
love
free
free. Thank you
too.
so
There you
much,
go.
Gail. Thank you. That's so kind of you. Thanks for the offer.
Thank you so much.
And there you have it. It was a pleasure chatting with Gail. Gail, thanks again so much for coming on the podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, I highly recommend subscribing to our newsletter at theconsumervc.com, where you'll receive new episodes straight to your inbox and a weekly recap of all the consumer deals that are happening. If you're listening to this on YouTube, also please click the subscribe button. Or if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can also subscribe there. Thanks for listening.